The security guard's hand shot up, blocking her path at the gleaming entrance of Sterling Global Industries. "Ma'am, the cleaning staff uses the service entrance around back," he said, eyeing her simple cotton dress and worn leather flats. Behind him, executives in $1,000 suits breezed through the marble lobby, their designer heels clicking against imported Italian stone. Margaret Chen clutched her weathered briefcase tighter, her quiet smile never wavering as a group of junior analysts snickered, one whispering loud enough for everyone to hear, "Did someone's grandmother get lost on her way to bingo?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Sterling Global Industries headquarters pierced the Manhattan skyline like a crystal spear, its 60 floors of mirrored glass reflecting the ambitious dreams of Wall Street below. Inside its climate-controlled halls, power moved in calculated steps, measured in stock options and corner offices. The lobby alone cost more than most companies' annual budgets, with its soaring atrium, living green walls, and a waterfall that cascaded down 3 stories of black granite. This morning, the usual symphony of success played out as executives rushed toward private elevators, their conversations peppered with merger talks and quarterly projections. Margaret Chen stood at the threshold of this kingdom of commerce, her presence like a whisper in a hurricane. At 53, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered storms without losing her center. Her black hair, streaked with silver, was pulled into a simple bun. Her dress, a modest navy blue, had been carefully pressed that morning in her Brooklyn apartment. The briefcase in her hand had belonged to her father, its leather worn smooth by decades of use. Everything about her spoke of practicality over prestige, substance over show. The security guard, Marcus Williams, had been manning this post for 5 years. He'd developed an eye for who belonged and who didn't, and this woman clearly fell into the latter category. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside," he said, not unkindly but firmly. "We have a major board meeting starting soon, and the lobby needs to remain clear." A cluster of marketing associates gathered near the reception desk, their morning lattes steaming in branded cups. Sophia Winters, the department's rising star, nudged her colleague. "Look at this," she whispered loud enough to carry. "Someone's lost tourist trying to find the subway." Their laughter rippled through the group, sharp and dismissive. Margaret reached into her briefcase, her movements unhurried. "I have a meeting to attend," she said softly, producing a simple access card that looked nothing like the platinum-edged badges the executives carried. "That's not a valid Sterling Global ID," Marcus insisted, his training kicking in. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Richard Blackstone III emerged from the executive elevator just then, his presence commanding instant attention. The Monsieur, youngest VP in company history at 32, he wore power like his tailored Tom Ford suit, naturally, expensively, and without question. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over Margaret with the briefest pause. "Marcus, what's the holdup? We can't have random people cluttering the entrance." The receptionist, Vivian Hart, called out from behind her marble fortress. "Should I alert building security? We've had issues with protesters trying to infiltrate before." Her manicured nails clicked against her keyboard, already drafting an incident report. A small crowd had begun to form, drawn by the subtle drama unfolding in their usually seamless morning routine. James Morrison, head of legal, checked his Patek Philippe watch impatiently. "For heaven's sake, just escort her out. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, and we can't have delays." Margaret's smile remained gentle, almost amused. "I understand your concern," she said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent that spoke of long-ago shores. "Perhaps someone could verify my appointment with the 45th floor." The suggestion was met with incredulous looks. The 45th floor housed the executive boardroom, the holy of holies where only C-suite officers and board members ever set foot. Sophia actually laughed out loud. The 45th floor. Lady, the only way you're seeing that floor is if you're delivering lunch orders. And even then, you'd need clearance, added Derek Chang from Acquisitions, adjusting his Hermes tier. Those elevators require biometric access. The morning sun slanted through the towering windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. The waterfall continued its endless cascade, a backdrop to the growing tension. More employees had paused in their morning rush, smartphones discreetly recording what promised to be stellar water cooler gossip. Richard stepped forward, his patience visibly thinning. "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of appointment you think you have, but Sterling Global is a Fortune 500 company. We don't take walk-ins." His tone carried the practiced condescension of someone used to being obeyed without question. "If you need directions to social services or an employment agency, Vivian can provide you with a list." A ripple of cruel amusement passed through the gathered crowd. Someone from IT muttered about updating security protocols. A junior executive suggested calling the nice officers to help the confused lady find her way. Margaret's fingers brushed the worn edge of her briefcase, a gesture so familiar it seemed almost ritualistic. Inside lay documents that would reshape the future of everyone in this building, but for now, she simply observed. Her eyes, dark and knowing, took in every face, every sneer, every dismissive glance. Years of boardroom battles had taught her that the most valuable intelligence often came from seeing how people treated those they considered beneath them. "She's probably one of those professional complainers," suggested Carla Nguyen from HR, her voice carrying across the lobby. "Remember last month? That woman who claimed she invented some algorithm we used? Or maybe she's applying for the janitorial position," offered Bradley Cooper from Finance. "Though honestly, we usually require better presentation even for maintenance staff." The irony of their statements would soon become legendary within Sterling Global's halls. But for now, their words hung in the air like poison, each barb designed to remind this simple-looking woman of her place, which was decidedly not here among the titans of industry. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Despite his job requiring him to turn away the unauthorized, something about this woman's calm certainty made him hesitate. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist." "Of course," Margaret interrupted gently. "But first, might I suggest calling extension 4501? Ask for Mrs. Patricia Hollingsworth in the chairman's office. Tell her Margaret has arrived for the 9 o'clock meeting." The mention of Patricia Hollingsworth, the legendary executive assistant who had served 3 company presidents over 30 years, caused a slight pause in the mockery. Patricia's name carried weight. She was known as the gatekeeper to power, the woman who could end careers with a single memo. Richard scoffed. "Nice try. Patricia doesn't schedule meetings with—" He gestured vaguely at Margaret's modest appearance. "Whatever this is." "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "protocol does require me to verify any claimed appointments with the executive floor." "Fine," Richard snapped. "Waste everyone's time. Call Patricia." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When she confirms this is nonsense, we're reviewing security procedures and your employment status. As Marcus reached for the phone, the lobby's atmosphere crackled with anticipation. The morning rush had ground to a halt, executives and assistants alike forming a loose semicircle around the scene. Someone had started a group chat, rapidly filling with real-time updates and snarky comments. The lobby lady was already trending on the company's internal social network. Margaret stood perfectly still, her posture relaxed but dignified. Her eyes found the massive Sterling Global logo etched into the marble wall, a stylized phoenix rising from geometric flames. Few knew the symbol's true meaning, chosen by the company's founder to represent resurrection from failure, the power of second chances. Her lips curved slightly at the thought. The phone call to Patricia would change everything. But for these last few moments, Margaret Chen was still invisible to them. A nobody in a navy dress, a footnote in their mourning of importance. They couldn't see the 3 MIT degrees hidden behind her simple appearance, or the 15 years she'd spent turning around failing tech companies in Singapore and Seoul. They didn't know about the nights she'd spent sleeping on factory floors, to understand production problems, or the time she'd learned Mandarin, Korean, and Japanese to better connect with her global teams. They certainly didn't know about the private equity firm that had quietly acquired a controlling stake in Sterling Global 3 months ago, or about the exhaustive search that had led them to recruit her from her self-imposed sabbatical. After her husband's death 2 years ago, she'd withdrawn from the corporate world, spending time teaching business ethics at a small college and volunteering at a neighborhood community center. The board had pursued her relentlessly, drawn by her reputation, for transformation without destruction, for building bridges where others built walls. Her condition for accepting had been unique. She would enter the company unannounced, experience it from the ground up, see its true culture before revealing herself. "You can't fix what you don't understand," she'd told them, "and you can't understand what you don't experience." Now, as Marcus dialed the extension, Margaret's mind catalogued everything she'd witnessed. The casual cruelty, the knee-jerk elitism, the way power had calcified into entitlement. Sterling Global's numbers were failing not because of market conditions, but because of this blindness to value that didn't arrive in expensive packaging, this reflexive dismissal of anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of success. Her father, a quiet man who had built a small electronics shop into a modest chain, had taught her that the measure of a company wasn't in its marble lobbies or stock price, but in how it treated the least powerful person who walked through its doors. "Business is just people, Maggie," he'd said in his accented English. "Treat people like numbers, you get numbers. Treat people like people, you get miracles." The elevator chimed, and more employees emerged, drawn by the unusual spectacle. The lobby had become a theater, with Margaret as the unwitting protagonist. In a corporate drama, whispers swirled about her threadbare briefcase, her sensible shoes, the slight tremor in her hands that they mistook for fear rather than the early onset of the condition that had claimed her mother, a detail she'd shared with no one at Sterling Global, not even the board. Emma Thorne from marketing leaned toward her colleague. $10 says she's going to claim she's some long-lost relative of the founder. 20 says she tries to slip past security when they're distracted, countered Paul Rodriguez from sales. The betting pool grew as Marcus waited for Patricia to answer. The morning sun climbed higher, its light catching the crystal chandelier and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. The waterfall continued its eternal descent, a meditation on persistence that everyone ignored. Margaret's thoughts drifted to her team in Seoul, the way they'd celebrated when their division turned its first profit in 5 years. They'd brought their families to the office party, children running through the halls, grandmothers sharing homemade kimchi, everyone understanding that business success meant nothing if it didn't translate to human happiness. She wondered if Sterling Global had ever seen such a celebration, or if success here was measured only in cold numbers and corner offices. "Patricia Hollingsworth's office," came the crisp voice through Marcus's phone speaker, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "Mrs. Hollingsworth, this is Marcus at the main security desk. I have a woman here claiming to have a 9 o'clock appointment with the executive floor. She says her name is Margaret." The pause that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Then, Patricia's voice, carefully controlled but with an undertone that made several executives straighten unconsciously. "Margaret Chen. She didn't give a last name, ma'am." "Describe her, please." Marcus glanced at Margaret apologetically. Approximately 5'4", Asian, mid-50s, wearing a navy dress and carrying a brown briefcase. Another pause. Then, "Marcus, please escort Miss Chen to the executive elevator immediately. Use your override code. I'll meet her on 45. The lobby fell silent. Patricia Hollingsworth didn't meet anyone at the elevator. People came to her. Richard's confident smirk faltered. "There must be some mistake," he began. Patricia's voice cut through his protest like a blade. "The only mistake, Mr. Blackstone, is the delay in bringing Ms. Chen to her appointment. Marcus, is there a problem?" "No, ma'am. Right away, ma'am." As Marcus fumbled for his security card, his hands suddenly unsteady, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted palpably. The same people who had been so eager to mock now exchanged uncertain glances. Smartphones lowered, conversations died. "This way, Ms. Chen," Marcus said, his tone now carefully respectful. "I apologize for the delay." Margaret inclined her head graciously. "Not at all. You were doing your job." She turned to face the assembled crowd, her gaze settling briefly on each face. Richard's dawning unease, Sophia's confused frown, Vivian's sudden nervousness. "Thank you all for the warm Sterling Global welcome. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other soon." The walk to the executive elevator seemed to take forever. The click of Margaret's modest flats against the marble was the only sound besides the waterfall. As Marcus swiped his card and pressed his thumb to the biometric, "Scanner!" whispers erupted behind them. Who is she? Why would Patricia meet her personally? Did you see how calm she was? What's in that briefcase? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Margaret stepped inside, turning to face the lobby one last time. Her eyes met Richard's, and something in her gaze made him take an involuntary step back. The doors began to close. "Wait!" Sophia called out suddenly. What position are you interviewing for?" Margaret's smile was enigmatic. "Oh, I'm not interviewing." The doors slid shut on her final words. "The interview was for all of you." As the elevator rose toward the 45th floor, Margaret Chen opened her briefcase and pulled out a single folder. Inside were detailed notes on every person she'd encountered that morning, their names, positions, and most tellingly, their behavior when they thought no one important was watching. The board had asked her to evaluate Sterling Global's culture problem. In 20 minutes, she'd learned more than a dozen consultants could have uncovered in months. The elevator climbed silently toward the executive floor, carrying the future of Sterling Global in a weathered briefcase and comfortable shoes. Below, in the lobby, the normal rhythm of corporate life slowly resumed. But something had fundamentally shifted. The waterfall continued its endless cascade, but now it seemed to whisper of changes coming, changes that would flow from the top down, reshaping everything in their path. On the 45th floor, Patricia Hollingsworth waited by the elevator, her usual stern expression softened by something that might have been pride. She had served 3 CEOs, but she'd never respected any of them the way she respected the woman about to emerge from those doors. Margaret Chen's appointment had been the board's most closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of people. At the very top, the way she'd insisted on entering the company as a nobody, experiencing firsthand how Sterling Global treated those it considered beneath notice, had already become boardroom legend. The elevator doors opened on the 45th floor, revealing a granite and glass corridor that felt worlds away from the marble lobby below. Patricia Hollingsworth stood waiting, her silver hair styled in an impeccable chignon, her charcoal suit speaking of quiet authority. She inclined her head slightly as Margaret stepped out. "Welcome back, Ms. Chen," Patricia said, her voice warm in a way that few at Sterling Global ever heard. "The board is assembled in the main conference room. They're quite eager to proceed with the formal introduction." Margaret touched Patricia's arm gently. 5 more minutes. I'd like to make a call first." Patricia understood immediately. Of course, your temporary office is ready. She gestured toward a door marked only with a number. I've taken the liberty of having IT establish the video feeds from all common areas as you requested. Inside the office, Margaret set her briefcase on the desk and pulled out her phone, dialing a number she knew by heart. The face that appeared on screen belonged to her daughter, Sarah, a pediatric surgeon in Boston. "Mom, how did it go? Did they treat you as badly as you expected?" Margaret smiled wryly. "Worse, actually. They tried to send me to the service entrance. Please tell me you're going to fire them all." "You know that's not how I work, sweetheart. People can change when given the right reasons. You're too forgiving. After what you've been through, building companies from nothing, saving thousands of jobs. And they judge you by your shoes. It's not about forgiveness. It's about transformation. Your father always said, you can't fill a cup that's already full. Sometimes you have to empty it first." Sarah finished, having heard her father's wisdom countless times. "I still miss him, Mom." "So do I, every day." Margaret glanced at her reflection in the window. "I need to go. The board's waiting. Go get 'em, CEO, Mom, and don't be too gentle. Some cups need to be knocked over before they can be emptied." After ending the call, Margaret took a moment to center herself. She opened her briefcase and pulled out 2 items. Her father's old calculator, worn smooth from years of use, and a small photo of her family, her late husband, David, Sarah, and their son, Michael, now an environmental engineer in Singapore. These talismans had accompanied her through every major business decision for 30 years. She touched the calculator briefly, remembering her father's small electronics shop where she'd learned to count inventory before she could properly write her name. That shop had taught her that every number represented a person, a customer who trusted you, an employee who depended on you, a supplier who partnered with you. It was a lesson most of Sterling Global's executives had never learned. Patricia knocked softly. "They're ready for you." The boardroom was a testament to corporate power, with its panoramic views of Manhattan and a table that could seat 30. The 12 board members rose as Margaret entered, their expressions ranging from anticipation to barely concealed curiosity. At the head of the table stood Harrison Whitfield III, the chairman who had personally courted Margaret for 6 months before she agreed to take the position. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison announced, his Boston Brahmin accent carrying generations of privilege, "I present Margaret Chen, Sterling Global's new Chief Executive Officer." The applause was polite but uncertain. Margaret had insisted on an unusual contract. Her first 90 days would be probationary, not for her performance, but for the company's. If she determined that Sterling Global's culture was irredeemable, she could walk away with no penalties, and the board would be obligated to sell the company. "Thank you, Harrison," Margaret said, taking her place at the head of the table. "Before we discuss the transition, I'd like to share what I observed this morning." She opened her briefcase and pulled out her notes. At 8:47 a.m., I was stopped at the entrance by security guard Marcus Williams. He was doing his job. However, in the 17 minutes that followed, I witnessed 23 separate instances of what I can only describe as casual cruelty. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Richard Blackstone III suggested I needed directions to social services. Sophia Winters compared me to a lost tourist. James Morrison wanted me escorted out to avoid delaying his meeting. Emma Thorne started a betting pool on whether I was delusional or criminal. Margaret looked up from her notes. "In less than 20 minutes, your employees revealed exactly why Sterling Global has lost 42% of its market value in 3 years. You've created a culture where human worth is measured entirely by appearance, where innovation cannot emerge from unexpected sources, and where leadership means dominance rather than service." Harrison cleared his throat. Margaret, we brought you in precisely because... not because you're inherently cruel, but because you've been trained to see people as categories rather than individuals. That training ends today." She stood up. "All department heads will meet in conference room B in 30 minutes. We're going to discuss the new organizational structure." The meeting that followed would become legendary in Sterling Global's history. Margaret drew an inverted pyramid on the whiteboard, placing customers at the top, followed by frontline employees, middle management, and finally at the very bottom, the C-suite. "In this structure," she explained, "every level exists to serve the level above it. Executives serve managers, managers serve employees, employees serve customers. Anyone who cannot accept this inversion should submit their resignation by end of business today." Sophia Winters raised her hand tentatively. "Ms. Chen, I was one of the people who... This morning, I said some things. Yes, you did. And now you have a choice. You can leave or you can learn. If you choose to stay, I expect you to spend next week working alongside our customer service team. You'll learn every name, every story, every challenge they face. Then you'll report back with 3 recommendations for making their jobs easier." "I'd like to stay," Sophia said quietly, "and learn." One by one, the executives who had mocked Margaret that morning faced their own moment of reckoning. Some chose to leave, unwilling to adapt to a world where their carefully cultivated superiority meant nothing. Others, like Sophia, saw an opportunity for redemption. At 3 p.m., the all-hands meeting began. The company auditorium filled with over 2,000 employees, from janitors to vice presidents. The buzz of speculation was deafening until Margaret walked onto the stage. She wore the same simple navy dress from that morning. No power suit, no image consultants, no carefully crafted corporate persona. Just Margaret. "Good afternoon," she began. "My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm your new CEO. This morning, many of you saw me in the lobby. Some of you laughed. Some of you made bets. Some of you suggested I should be cleaning your offices rather than leading your company." The auditorium fell silent. "And that," Margaret smiled, "is exactly why I'm here." She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with Sterling Global's original mission statement, penned by the founder 50 years ago. "To serve our customers, enrich our employees, and contribute to our communities." Somewhere along the way, Margaret continued, we forgot these words. We began to serve our egos, enrich our executives, and contribute only to our shareholders. That changes today. For the next hour, Margaret laid out her vision. No employee would be laid off, but many would be reassigned. The management structure would be flattened. Decision-making would be pushed down to those closest to the customers. Innovation would be rewarded regardless of its source. "I don't care if our next breakthrough comes from an MIT graduate or a maintenance worker who never finished high school," she declared. "Good ideas have no pedigree." She ended with a story about her father's electronics shop. Every evening, he would stand at the door and bow to each customer as they left. I asked him why he bowed to people who had already paid. He said, "They trust us with their money. We must honor that trust with respect." Margaret looked out at the sea of faces. For too long, Sterling Global has forgotten how to bow. We've forgotten that our customers, our employees, our communities trust us. Today, we begin to earn back that trust. The applause started slowly, building from the back of the auditorium where the hourly workers sat. It spread forward through the ranks until even the executives in the front rows were on their feet. Over the following weeks, the transformation of Sterling Global began in earnest. The executive floor was converted into collaborative workspace. The marble lobby's velvet ropes came down. Marcus Williams was promoted to head of security training, teaching new hires that respect was the first line of defense. Richard Blackston, 3 submitted his resignation, but Margaret asked him to stay. "You have talent, Richard. You just need to learn how to use it for others instead of yourself." She assigned him to lead a new initiative connecting Sterling Global with inner city, schools, teaching business skills to underprivileged youth. Sophia Winters threw herself into her customer service rotation, eventually proposing a complete overhaul of the department that reduced wait times by 40% while improving employee satisfaction. She would later become one of Margaret's most trusted lieutenants. 3 months into Margaret's tenure, Sterling Global posted its first profitable quarter in 2 years. But the real victory came in the employee satisfaction surveys. Engagement scores had risen from 34% to 78%. Turnover dropped by half. Innovation submissions increased tenfold. The business press called it the Chen miracle, but Margaret rejected the label. "There's no miracle here," she told Fortune magazine. "Just basic human decency combined with sound business principles." 1 year later, Sterling Global stock had risen 67%. The company was featured in case studies at Harvard Business School, not for its financial engineering, but for its radical approach to human capital. Margaret's inverted pyramid became a model for organizational transformation, but for Margaret, the real success was measured in smaller moments. Like when she overheard Marcus Williams telling a new security hire, "We don't judge people by their appearance here. Our CEO taught us that lesson on her first day." Or when she received a handwritten note from a call center employee, "Thank you for seeing us." The marble lobby still gleamed, the waterfall still cascaded, but the atmosphere had transformed. "I'm not finished, Harrison." Her voice remained soft, but carried an edge that silenced the room. "Your head of HR suggested I might be applying for a janitorial position, implying that even maintenance staff should meet certain aesthetic standards. Your youngest VP called me whatever this is, dehumanizing language that suggests a fundamental lack of respect for persons outside his social sphere." She stood and walked to the window, gazing down at the city below. 11 years ago, when I took over Hanshin Technologies in Seoul, they were 3 months from bankruptcy. Their executives spent fortunes on office renovations while their engineers worked with outdated equipment. Sound familiar? Several board members nodded reluctantly. I made one fundamental change. I inverted the pyramid. Executives flew economy, while salespeople flew business class. The C-suite shared an open floor, while engineers got private offices. Every manager, myself included, spent 1 week each quarter working on the factory floor or in customer service. Margaret turned back to face the board. Within 18 months, Hanshin was profitable. Within 3 years, they were industry leaders. Not because of financial engineering or clever marketing, but because we remembered that business is about human beings, serving human beings. Victoria Pembroke, the board's longest-serving member, leaned forward. "And you believe Sterling Global can undergo a similar transformation?" "I observed something else this morning," Margaret replied. When Patricia Hollingsworth spoke, the entire lobby fell silent, not from fear but from respect. Your security guard, Marcus Williams, showed genuine concern about following proper procedure. "There are good people here, drowning in a toxic culture." She returned to her seat. "So here's what's going to happen. Every executive, starting today, will spend 1 week working in our call centers, mailrooms, or maintenance departments. Dress codes are abolished. The executive dining room will serve the same food as the company cafeteria, and anyone who refers to another human being as whatever this is will be invited to seek employment elsewhere." Robert Stannard, the CFO, raised his hand. "With respect, Margaret, don't you think these measures are a bit extreme?" "Extreme?" Margaret smiled. "Robert, in 2018, you authored a memo suggesting the company could save $3 million annually by reducing support staff wages by 4%. That memo was implemented. Did you know that 63 of those employees now work second jobs to afford health insurance?" Robert's face reddened. That was a financial optimization exercise. No, it was a choice that valued numbers over people, and it's exactly why Sterling Global is failing. Margaret pulled out her tablet. I spent last night reviewing 5 years of exit interviews. Do you know the #1 reason talented employees leave? It's not money or benefits or even work-life balance. It's that they feel invisible, unvalued, like replaceable parts in a machine. She tapped the screen, projecting data onto the wall display. Meanwhile, companies with engaged, respected employees show 21% higher profitability, 17% higher productivity, and 10% higher customer metrics. This isn't charity, it's good business. For the next hour, Margaret outlined her vision. The transformation would begin immediately, with the afternoon's all-hands meeting where she would be introduced to the company. But first, there would be some immediate changes. At 11:30 a.m., as executives throughout the building prepared for lunch at L'Etoile, Sterling Global's exclusive executive dining room, they received a surprising email. Effective immediately, L'Etoile is closed for renovations. All employees are welcome to enjoy lunch in our newly upgraded company cafeteria, where menu options have been expanded to accommodate all dietary preferences and cultural backgrounds. Margaret Chen, CEO. The real shock came when these same executives arrived at the cafeteria to find Margaret herself in line, tray in hand, chatting with a mailroom clerk about his daughter's soccer tournament. She sat at a table with employees from 3 different departments, learning about their jobs, their frustrations, their ideas for improvement. Richard Blackstone III entered the cafeteria with his usual entourage, saw Margaret, and hesitated. His morning's humiliation was fresh in his mind, but his political instincts were finely honed. He approached her table. "Miss Chen," he began formally, "I owe you an apology for this morning." Margaret looked up from her conversation with a junior analyst. "Sit down, Richard." He sat, uncomfortably aware that everyone in the cafeteria was watching. "Tell me," Margaret said, cutting her salad, "how long have you worked here?" 7 years. I joined straight from Wharton. "And in those 7 years, how many times have you eaten in this cafeteria?" Richard's silence was answer enough. "How many of your direct reports could you identify out of uniform? How many of their children's names do you know? When was the last time you asked someone below director level for their opinion on something that mattered?" I don't. "This morning you called me whatever this is. Where once there had been judgment and exclusion, now there was welcome and possibility. The velvet ropes were gone, replaced by an open space where employees of all levels mingled freely." On the anniversary of her first day, Margaret stood in that lobby again, this time waiting for a group of high school students from the Bronx who were visiting as part of Sterling Global's new community outreach program. She wore another simple dress, her hair in the same modest bun. A young intern, not recognizing the CEO, approached her. "Can I help you find someone?" he asked politely. Margaret smiled. "No, thank you. I know exactly where I belong." As the students arrived, wide-eyed at the corporate grandeur, Margaret stepped forward to greet them. "Welcome to Sterling Global," she said. "Let me show you around. And remember, never let anyone tell you that you don't belong somewhere just because you don't look the part. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one wearing the simplest shoes." The students followed her into the elevator, ascending toward possibilities they'd never imagined. Behind them, the waterfall continued its endless descent, its message transformed from one of corporate power to one of constant renewal, a reminder that change, like water, can wear away even the hardest stone. In her office later that day, Margaret looked at the photo of her family on her desk. "We did it, David," she whispered to her late husband's image. "We proved that good business and good humanity aren't opposites. They're the same thing. Outside, her window, the Manhattan skyline, stretched toward the horizon, and somewhere in the building below, a maintenance worker was sharing his idea for improving energy efficiency with a vice president who actually listened. The transformation was complete, but the work of maintaining it would never end. Margaret Chen had learned long ago that true leadership wasn't about commanding from above, but about lifting from below. At Sterling Global, she hadn't just saved a company, she had redeemed its soul. 5 years had passed since Margaret Chen's transformative first day at Sterling Global, and the company had become a case study in corporate reinvention. The autumn morning was crisp as she stood in her office, preparing for what would be her final board meeting as CEO. At 58, she had accomplished what she'd set out to do. Sterling Global was now ranked among the top 10 best places to work in America. Its stock had tripled, and most importantly, it had rediscovered its soul. The boardroom filled with familiar faces, many of whom had been skeptics when she first arrived. Harrison Whitfield III had retired 2 years ago, replaced by Dr. Amelia Foster, a forward-thinking economist who shared Margaret's vision of stakeholder capitalism. The other board members had evolved too, shaped by years of witnessing the power of putting people first. "Before we begin the formal agenda," Margaret announced, "I have something to share." She paused, looking at each face around. "The table. This will be my last meeting as your CEO. It's time for Sterling Global to embrace its next chapter under new leadership." The room erupted in surprised protests, but Margaret raised her hand gently. "The succession plan has been in place for 2 years. You all know who I've been grooming for this role." On cue, the door opened and Richard Blackstone III entered. But this was not the same man who had dismissed Margaret as whatever this is 5 years ago. His designer suits had given way to business casual attire that put people at ease. His eyes, once cold with calculation, now carried warmth and genuine concern. The transformation had been profound and authentic. "Richard has earned this," Margaret continued, "not through privilege or politics, but through dedication to our values. He spent 5 years learning to serve rather than command, to listen rather than dictate, to lift others rather than climb over them." Richard took the seat beside Margaret, his humility evident. "I owe everything to Margaret's mentorship," he said quietly. 5 years ago, I thought success meant standing above others. She taught me it means lifting others up. I promise to honor that legacy." The transition was formalized that afternoon in another all-hands meeting held in the same auditorium, where Margaret had first revealed her identity. This time, however, the atmosphere was not one of shock, but of celebration tinged with bittersweet emotion. Margaret was more than a CEO to many employees. She was the leader who had seen their worth when no one else had. The highlight came when Marcus Williams, now Vice President of Global Security Operations, presented Margaret with a gift from the employees, a crystal sculpture of an inverted pyramid with thousands of names etched into its surface. Every person who worked at Sterling Global. "You flipped our world upside down," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "And in doing so, you set it right." Margaret's farewell address was characteristically humble. "I didn't transform Sterling Global," she told the assembled employees. "You did. I simply reminded you of your own worth, your own power, your own capacity for greatness. This company succeeded because each of you chose to see the humanity in your colleagues, your customers, yourselves." She shared one final story. "Last week, I received a letter from a competitor's CEO asking for the secret to our success. He wanted to know what management system we'd implemented, what software we used, what consultants we'd hired. I wrote back with 3 words: we started caring." The auditorium thundered with applause. Sophia Winters, now Chief Innovation Officer, wiped tears from her eyes. She had come so far from the young executive who had mocked a lost tourist in the lobby. James Morrison, who had worried about board meeting delays, now led the company's pro bono legal services program, helping small businesses navigate regulatory challenges. The next morning, Margaret's final day, she arrived at 6 a.m. to find the lobby filled with employees. They had come in early, some with their families, to form an honor guard from the entrance to the executive elevator. As she walked through this human corridor, people reached out to shake her hand, hug her, thank her. "You saved my job," said one factory supervisor. "You helped me believe in myself," added a young analyst. "You showed us what real leadership looks like," murmured a senior vice president who had once considered resigning rather than change. At the elevator, Richard waited with the executive team. "We have one last surprise," he said, gesturing to the control panel. Where once the executive elevator had required biometric access and special clearance, there was now a simple button marked "All floors, all people." "We had it changed this morning," Richard explained. "No more exclusive access, no more barriers. Every elevator in this building now serves every person equally." Margaret smiled, touching the button. That's the Sterling Global Way. Her last act as CEO was to sign the paperwork establishing the Margaret Chen Foundation for Inclusive Leadership, funded by her own stock options and matched by the company. The foundation would provide scholarships and training programs for aspiring leaders from underrepresented backgrounds, ensuring that the next generation of executives would understand that true power comes from service, not status. As she cleared out her office, a task that took mere minutes as she had always kept personal items to a minimum, Margaret came across the folder of notes from her first day, documenting each slight, each insult, each moment of casual cruelty. She considered shredding them, then decided to leave them in the desk drawer with a note: "Remember where we started. Never go back." Richard found her there, holding her father's old calculator and the family photo that had guided her through every decision. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "How do I fill shoes this big?" Margaret placed the calculator in his hands. "My father gave this to me when I took over my first company. He said, 'Every number is a person. Never forget that.' I think it's time it guided someone else." That evening, Sterling Global held a farewell celebration, not in an exclusive venue, but in the employee cafeteria where Margaret had first broken bread with her people. The party spilled into the lobby, with the waterfall providing a backdrop to stories and memories shared by employees from every level of the company. As Margaret prepared to leave for the final time, she found Marcus Williams waiting by the door, the same spot where he had once tried to redirect her to the service entrance. "I wanted to be the last person to see you out," he said. "To make up for being the first person who didn't see you at all. You were doing your job, Marcus, and you did it well. But I learned something that day. Sometimes doing your job means looking deeper, seeing the person behind the appearance. You taught us all that lesson." They walked together to the entrance. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall, painting the Manhattan streets with reflected light. Margaret paused at the threshold, looking back at the lobby where her journey at Sterling Global had begun. "You know," she said to Marcus, "I never told anyone this, but I was scared that morning. Not of being turned away, but of what I might find inside. I worried that the company might be beyond redemption. And now I know that no organization is beyond redemption if its people are willing to change." As Margaret stepped out into the rain, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, employees who wanted one last glimpse of the CEO who had revolutionized their workplace. Among them was a young woman in a simple dress, clutching a worn briefcase, looking nervous. Margaret approached her. "First day?" she asked gently. The young woman nodded. I'm starting in the mailroom, but someday I want to be like you. Margaret smiled. You already are. You showed up. You're willing to start anywhere. That's where transformation begins. She leaned closer. And remember, the people who matter will see your worth, regardless of where you start or what you wear. As her town car pulled away, Margaret looked back at the Sterling Global building one last time. The lights were still on in the cafeteria where the celebration continued. In 5 years, she had not just turned around a failing company. She had created a community where every person's contribution was valued, where leadership meant service, and where success was measured in human terms. The news of her departure sparked a flurry of media coverage. Financial analysts speculated about Sterling Global's future, while leadership experts dissected the Chen method of organizational transformation. But the most telling commentary came from a janitor interviewed by Bloomberg. She knew my name from day one. She asked about my kids. When my wife was sick, she made sure I had the support I needed. That's not management, that's family. Richard's first day as CEO began much as Margaret's had, in the lobby at 7 a.m., greeting employees as they arrived. He had learned well from his mentor. When a young man in an ill-fitting suit approached, looking lost and overwhelmed, Richard didn't wait for security to intervene. "Can I help you find someone?" he asked warmly. I'm starting today in IT support," the young man stammered. "But I think I'm in the wrong place. This looks too fancy for someone like me." Richard smiled, remembering his own words from 5 years ago. "You're exactly where you belong. Let me walk you to your department. I'm Richard, by the way. Jake Martinez. Welcome to Sterling Global, Jake. We're glad you're here." As they walked through the lobby, past the spot where Margaret had once stood her ground against mockery and judgment, Richard felt the weight of his responsibility. He was not just leading a company, he was safeguarding a culture that recognized the inherent worth of every human being who walked through its doors. Margaret, meanwhile, had returned to teaching, this time at a business school that emphasized ethical leadership. Her first lecture drew students from across the university, all eager to learn from the woman who had transformed one of America's most toxic corporate cultures into a model of inclusive excellence. "Leadership," she began, writing on the whiteboard, "is not about being seen, it's about seeing others." She turned to face her students. 5 years ago, I walked into Sterling Global Industries wearing a simple dress and carrying an old briefcase. I was mocked, dismissed, and nearly ejected from the building. But that experience became the foundation for everything that followed. A student raised her hand. "Professor Chen, what was the hardest part of changing the culture?" "Patience," Margaret replied without hesitation. "Change doesn't happen overnight. People need time to unlearn old habits, to rebuild trust, to discover their better selves." The hardest part was resisting the urge to simply fire everyone who had behaved badly that first morning. "Do you regret not doing that?" Margaret smiled. "Not at all. Some of those people became our strongest champions for change. Richard Blackstone, our new CEO, was one of the cruelest that day. Now he's the guardian of our values." Transformation is always more powerful than replacement. As the semester progressed, Margaret's classes became legendary. She taught through stories, examples, and most importantly, by modeling the behavior she expected. She knew every student's name, their backgrounds, their dreams. When the campus custodian mentioned his daughter was struggling with business school applications, Margaret offered to help, just as she had once helped security guards and mailroom clerks at Sterling Global. One day, she received a call from Richard. "We have a situation," he said. "A group of new executives from our latest acquisition are resistant to our culture. They think it's soft, that it undermines competitiveness." What are you going to do? I'm going to take them on a tour, starting in the mailroom and ending in the boardroom, just like you did with me. And if they still don't get it, then they'll need to find another company. We don't compromise on values. Margaret felt a surge of pride. The transformation she had started was now self-sustaining, protected by people who understood its importance. Back at Sterling Global, the company continued to thrive under Richard's leadership. The inverted pyramid structure had become so ingrained that new employees were surprised to learn it had ever been different. The company's success inspired other organizations to attempt similar transformations, though few achieved the same depth of change. On the 5th anniversary of Margaret's departure, Sterling Global announced record profits alongside record employee satisfaction scores. The company had expanded globally, but each new office was built on the same principles. No executive dining rooms, no exclusive elevators, no barriers between people. Richard marked the occasion with a company-wide address. 5 years ago, Margaret Chen left us with a simple charge: never forget where we started and never go back. Today, I'm proud to say we've not only maintained her vision, we've expanded it. He unveiled plans for the Chen Institute for Ethical Leadership, a Sterling Global-funded think tank that would research and promote human-centered business practices worldwide. Margaret, watching the announcement from her office at the university, felt tears in her eyes. That evening, she received a package from Sterling Global. Inside was a new briefcase, not expensive leather, but sturdy and practical, much like her old one. The note from Richard read, "For carrying wisdom to new places, thank you for showing us the way." As night fell over the city, Margaret sat in her study, reflecting on the journey. From her father's electronic shop to the pinnacle of corporate America, she had carried one simple truth: business is about people serving people. Everything else, profits, strategies, technologies, was secondary to that fundamental reality. Her phone rang. It was Sarah, her daughter, now running a network of clinics that provided healthcare to underserved communities. "Mom, I just read about the Chen Institute. Dad would be so proud." "He always knew," Margaret replied. "He used to say that changing one heart was harder than changing 1,000 balance sheets, but infinitely more valuable." After the call, Margaret opened her laptop to find hundreds of emails from former Sterling Global employees, sharing how the transformed culture had impacted their lives. A single mother who had been promoted from receptionist to department head. A veteran who found purpose again through the company's community service programs. A young immigrant who started in maintenance and now led a division. Each story reinforced the truth Margaret had always known. When you treat people with dignity, when you see their potential rather than their position, when you measure success by how many you lift up rather than how high you climb, extraordinary things happen. As she prepared for bed, Margaret glanced at the crystal pyramid the employees had given her, now sitting on her bookshelf. The thousands of etched names caught the lamplight, creating a constellation of human potential realized. She smiled, remembering the words she had spoken at that last all-hands meeting. "We started caring." It seemed so simple, yet it had changed everything. The next morning brought news that Sterling Global had been ranked #1 on Fortune's list of companies that changed the world. The article featured a photo of Margaret from her first day, standing in the lobby in her simple navy dress, juxtaposed with a recent image of the transformed company. Employees of all levels collaborating in the open workspace that had once been the exclusive executive floor. But the real measure of success, Margaret knew, was not in rankings or stock prices. It was in the security guard who now ran leadership training sessions, in the former janitor who had patented an innovative cleaning solution and now headed a new products division, In the young analyst who had once mocked her appearance and now mentored disadvantaged youth, teaching them that their worth wasn't determined by their clothes or connections. As she walked across campus to her morning lecture, Margaret passed a group of students discussing a case study. She overheard one say, "The Chen transformation at Sterling Global proves that ethical leadership isn't just morally right, it's economically superior." She smiled to herself. The revolution she had started with 10 perfect shots, not bullets, but examples of how to hit the target of human potential, had rippled far beyond Sterling Global's walls. It had become a movement, a philosophy, a new way of thinking about business and leadership. Entering her classroom, Margaret found her students already assembled, eager for today's lesson on organizational culture. She set down her practical briefcase, the one from Sterling Global, and looked at the bright faces before her. "Today," she began, "we're going to talk about the most powerful force in business. It's not technology or capital or market share. It's the simple act of seeing the human being in front of you, really seeing them, and recognizing their inherent worth." As she taught, Margaret thought about all the people who had doubted her that first morning at Sterling Global. All. The executives who had thought her methods were too soft, too idealistic. She thought about Richard, transformed from corporate shark to servant leader, about Sophia, who now championed diversity and inclusion with the fervor of the converted, about Marcus, whose journey from security guard to vice president inspired others to dream bigger. The lesson continued, but Margaret's mind wandered to the future. Retirement beckoned, but not yet. There were more leaders to train, more companies to inspire, more hearts to change. The work of transformation was never truly finished. That afternoon, she received a call from the CEO of another Fortune 500 company, one notorious for its cutthroat culture. "Professor Chen," the voice said hesitantly, "we need help. Our employee satisfaction is at an all-time low, talent is fleeing, and our reputation is in shambles. But our board is skeptical about your methods. They think business is about competition, not compassion." Margaret smiled, remembering her own first day at Sterling Global, the skepticism she had faced, the transformation that had followed. "Tell your board I'll visit next Monday," she replied. "I'll come through the main entrance and we'll see what happens." As she hung up, Margaret reached for her worn briefcase and her father's calculator, now returned to her by Richard when he felt secure enough in his own leadership. Another company needed transformation, another culture needed healing. The work continued. Outside her window, students crossed the quad, their diverse faces reflecting the future of business. A future where leadership meant service, where power meant responsibility, and where success was measured not by how high you climbed, but by how many you brought with you. Margaret Chen had proven that a simple woman with a briefcase full of wisdom could indeed change the world of corporate giants. Not through force or fear, but through the revolutionary act of caring about people. As she prepared for her next challenge, she knew that the greatest transformations always began the same way, with someone willing to see the worth in others that they couldn't yet see in themselves. The revolution of respect she had started at Sterling Global was spreading, one company at a time, one leader at a time, one human connection at a time. And Margaret Chen, the woman once dismissed as whatever this is, had become exactly what the business world needed. A reminder that behind every number was a person, behind every decision was a human impact, and behind every great company was the simple, transformative power of treating people with dignity. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.